So
you have to fight dogma. Part of the problem is you're fighting. So I will ask you, I wanted to ask us to do an experiment.
I'm all for it.
Where we pick up the phone, call any random oncologist, not to shame them, primary care physician, pick up the phone and said, you do a CBC, correct? Yes.
Can you define what a CBC is?
A complete blood count. Just you take a blood and you look for...
Yeah, the blood screen that everyone
blood
gets.
screen.
Yeah.
For whether you're anemic or not anemic.
Yeah.
People understand that, right? Red blood cells. And you see these red blood cells. And you give chemotherapy and radiation. And you ask, what do you look for? Well, we look to see if you're anemic. So we can give you this drug that Amgen makes called Epogen. We look to see whether your platelets have gone down. So we can give you a platelet transfusion. We look to see whether your neutrophils have gone down so that you don't get an infection called neutropenic fever. So we give you this drug, Epogen. Well, the problem is, does red blood cells cure cancer? No. Does platelets cure cancer? No. Does neutrophils kill cancer? No. What kills cancer? The natural killer cells and T cells. So in that CBC, there's a thing called the lymphocytes, correct? Do you look at that? No. The only cell that is important that kills cancer, 99.9% of oncologists will say, we don't pay any attention to that.
That
is
use
surprising.
A colloquial term, that does seem ass backwards. Why, if you're not to, attack oncologists, but if you're fighting cancer, why do you ignore the one cell that fights cancer?
That's the experiment I want us to do. and
that's a little mysterious. Am I missing something?
That's exactly. That's the missing link. The final frontier. The E equals MC squared. The God's equation. That is the key element in your body that we've been missing for 50 years. For 50 years. But it's even worse than that. Those missing links we've actually destroyed with chemotherapy. We've destroyed with radiotherapy, and we've destroyed with checkpoint inhibitors. We've destroyed with steroids. Guess what we give to patients? Chemotherapy, radiotherapy, steroids, and checkpoints. Am I missing something?
I don't know anything about this. I was a Russian studies major, but I have just because I'm 55, I know a lot of cancer patients. I have always been skeptical that the protocol is effective based on, so what I have noticed is those therapies seem to beat back the cancer short term, but then so often you watch it come roaring back. I'm in remission, and then wham, you just get hit by a tidal wave of cancer and eliminated.
So if you see my writings, I have written so many times, you win the battle and you lose the war.
So this is not, I'm not imagining this phenomenon.
You're not imagining it. You win the battle and you lose the war. The reason you win the battle is because you see this little blip of a response with chemotherapy. And then the moment you stop, or not even, you've actually now killed the cells that were there to protect you. You've upregulated the suppressor cells, and you get metastasis, and you say, oops, sorry, you now have to go to hospice. Think about that. That's what we've been doing for 50 years. That's the dogma that I'm fighting.
So let's just say I leave here and am diagnosed with, a serious life-threatening form of cancer. What would you recommend I do next?
So this is where you play chess and don't play checkers. This is where you play Go, where you say, okay, what is the cancer doing first? Well, guess what? The cancer is not stupid, so it's figured out a way to hide from these killer cells. So the first thing you have to do is you have to expose the receptors on the cancer so the killer cells could recognize that. So even in the presence of chemotherapy, you don't use chemotherapy to kill the tumor. You use a tiny dose of chemotherapy just to stress the patient, the cancer, and the cancer says, oh my God, something's coming at me, and it starts exposing itself. So you go from hide to expose. So you use the chemotherapy at a low dose called low metronomic dose to use it as what I call an immunomodulator Importantly,
wait, I was asking, you're describing cancer as almost like an autonomous entity that has a goal, a will to destroy the human body.
it does.
But you're describing like
It's a machine.
but with intent and kind of clever behavior. It hides? Like what? You're describing like some foreign entity in the body that's trying to kill the body.
It is. It's like a virus.
But how can a tumor know to hide?
Because it has genomic sequencing in there that actually blocks the expression. So
It sounds diabolical.
it is diabolical. That's why I spent 50 years trying to understand. It's not a human brain. It's biology and how biology can mutate. And actually, your body is a beautiful thing. I mean, it's an exquisite thing. So it has to have this thing called epigenetics. So it has the genomic sequencing that says, I'm not going to express this. So we can now stress that and block the blocker, and it now expresses something on its surface that our T cells can recognize. So that's the first step.
Smoke it out.
Smoke it out. But your body has mechanisms to smoke it out. It gets even more complicated. Your body has a thing where you can induce what we call DAMPs, which is damage-associated molecular patterns, but forget that. It's a way of actually smoking it out, so now your T cells can recognize it. Okay, so now you've done step one. That's just step one. That's one molecule. So this is why I think the FDA needs to understand we're fighting a war where you need battlefield awareness all simultaneously, where you have to orchestrate your Marines, your Army, your Navy, your Air Force, all in the right place, so that you can use the tumor in your body to act as the weapon, as the vaccine. Because a tumor has molecules that is foreign to the rest of your body, and if you educate your T cells to recognize those molecules that is foreign to the rest of your body, that T cell can remember. Now you have a memory T cell. So for the first time in 2024, in our package insert, we have a molecule called the BioShield now, I'll call it the BioShield, that can activate the natural killer cell, activate the killer T cell, and drive memory T cells. We now have bladder cancer patients who would have lost their bladder in complete remission for 9 years and still alive.
And so the protocol is you administer low-dose chemo to identify where the tumor is.
You smoke it out.
You smoke it out.
But at the same time, you need to have the natural killer cells and T cells ready. So you give them the BioShield that upregulates and stimulates your natural killer cells and T cells.
What about radiation? Does that play a role?
That'll kill your natural killer cells and T cells.
So no.
Unless, and comes out unless, today the radiation is what they call 70 gigabits. It's huge doses. Unless you give a tiny little dose just to the tumor, nowhere else, to smoke it out. So you use radiation in a very different way called SBRT, a low dose.
To identify rather than destroy.
To expose rather than
expose.
So the algorithm is expose, from hide to expose. The next algorithm is activate and proliferate your NK cells.
And that's with the subcutaneous injection.
Correct. The next algorithm is to educate your T cells with a vaccine that you anticipate that's going to be exposed. So you now have educated T cells ready. So you've got educated T cells, you got NK cells. And the next thing is to activate your macrophages so they become killer macrophages. And the next step is to suppress the suppressors. You do that all simultaneously.
How much human suffering is involved in this? There's a lot in a conventional course of cancer therapy.
All as an outpatient. We've done hundreds of patients now.
So someone taking this course is he going to lose his hair or throw up all the time?
As an outpatient. No. What's even more exciting...
Because that matters for cancer patients. I mean, it's hard to be a cancer patient. It's horrible.
Yeah, but we're now seeing patients now in complete remission. More importantly, I want to treat patients before they need surgery. So I can use the tumor itself in the body as the vaccine to educate the body and the T cells all about that tumor. What's even more exciting now, we can take blood from you, 1 pint, and extract the natural killer cell and the T cell and grow billions and store in cryopreservation, just like you do from cord blood. We now have the ability to grow these natural killer cells and give it to anybody. So I always said, for the first time, we could become the American Red Cross of cancer, our country, and use these innovations as foreign policy.